Carlos Pascual is a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. He's now the senior vice president of geopolitics and international affairs at S&P Global. He's in Mexico City. Hi, Ambassador. Good to meet you and have you on our program this evening.
Likewise, nice to meet you, and thank you for the conversation that we're about to have.
I wanted to start off by asking you about, just if you don't mind, your reflections as someone who has lived in Ukraine, in your capacity there as a former ambassador, what it has been like to watch what's unfolded over the last 3 weeks and a bit unfold.
It's a destruction of an innocent people that have aspirations for a European future. When I was in Ukraine, one of the central tenets that I found impressive in my work with Ukrainians was that they believed that they're a European state. Physically, they are. Their vision was to see themselves united with Europe, and they were pursuing that. And that vision has become more consolidated over time. And what they've confronted is a Russia that can't live with that prospect that Ukraine will take decisions for its own future, that its people might have a different destiny from that which is seen by Vladimir Putin. And as a result of that, they've been confronted with increasing brutality from Russia that has targeted civilians as a way to try to get Ukraine to surrender, to cave. And what they've seen is what Russia has seen is a brutal resistance, a strong resistance that from the Ukrainians, where they are so committed to that European future and to the right to determine their own destiny and future that they will not give in, and they will continue to fight.
And what do you think the larger implications of that are? Because they continue to fight, they continue to resist, and it doesn't seem to deter Putin. In fact, as you've pointed out, it has made him target civilians and, make an effort to level complete cities like Mariupol, I'm thinking here. What do you think the implications of that strong resistance are?
I think we're going to see a confrontation and battle that's going to continue for a long period of time in some way or another. Neither side is willing to give in because their views are fundamentally different. For Vladimir Putin, this conquest of Ukraine is part of his fundamental vision of what security for Russia and what Russia's destiny should be, what Russia's grandeur should be about, that Russia should be able to control the decisions that its neighbors take on their sovereignty. And one of the points that Vladimir Putin has made in the past is that there are only 4 countries in the world that he sees as determining their own sovereignty: Russia, the United States, China, and India, and all others should make their decisions or should have their decisions determined by those around them. And therefore, Ukraine is fundamental to achieving that perspective of his view of security in Russia's future. For Ukraine, it's completely the opposite. It's that the Ukrainian people should have a right to the destiny that they should want, that they should associate with the countries and the allies that they want. And as a result of that, finding a simple compromise isn't easy to do. If Russia has the capacity to take control of some cities, which it may be able to do, even if there is this tremendous resistance, there's likely to be an insurgency that continues. The Ukrainians won't stop. Russia would probably have to have on the order of 500,000 troops to be able to control the country completely. And so I think what we will see is that for a period of time, that there will be some form of conflict that continues within Ukraine until it gets to a stage where it becomes really a perspective that there is no simple solution and that the two sides take a different approach in potentially reaching some kind of a ceasefire.
If in fact that does take a very long time, though, and it is as protracted, rather, as you lay out, what does that mean for the U.S., Canada, and its allies and their response going forward?
I think for the entire world, what's going to happen is a confrontation with the brutality and the horrors of the scenes that we're seeing in Ukraine today. Innocent civilians whose lives are being lost, cities that are being bombarded and destroyed. And then the question becomes, how do you respond? Up to now, the response through sanctions, particularly some of the financial measures, the freezing of Russia's central bank assets, surprisingly, 75% of which were held outside of Russia, has had an enormous impact. It's denied Russia access to the currency and the resources that they need to defend the ruble, to defend their banking system. And as a result of that, you've seen a collapse of the ruble. You've seen a collapse of Russian commodities. Over time, you're going to see the internal Russian economic system begin to freeze. But is that enough? And that's one of the questions that is going to continue to face the international community. They know that they need to continue to supply offensive military equipment to Ukraine. It's critical for them to continue to resist. There will be questions that continue to get put on the table, such as, is it possible to defend a no-fly zone over humanitarian areas? And these are issues that are going to increasingly confront leaders and are going to be an important part of the meetings that take place in Brussels this coming week, where President Biden has indicated that he will join. And I think it's going to be another key moment in trying to understand what is the combination of diplomacy, economic action, and support for Ukraine's military activities that are necessary to continue to allow the Ukrainians to maintain the type of resistance that they've mounted.
Ambassador, you also have a lot of expertise in the area of energy, and though obviously the impacts on the price of oil and the price of gas, are not meant to be compared at all to the suffering of Ukrainians in all of this. But I did want to ask you about if we do look at this as a more protracted or lengthy period of time in which this will be going on. Given the fluctuations we've seen just in the last 3 weeks in the price of oil, do you expect that to be continue to fluctuate, I guess, as long as this is part of as long as the war is going on, basically, the invasion is going on?
More than fluctuate, we're going to see a continuous rise in the prices of oil and gas. We've seen prices that have gone between $100 a barrel to about $130, $135 a barrel, huge swings. It's come down to some extent in the past few weeks, in part because we've seen that Russia has been able to continue to load ships with oil, although in many cases it doesn't appear that they have destinations and that those are based on earlier contracts. But moving into the future, we expect that there is going to be much more Russian oil, which is either not able to be shipped or where banks, insurance companies, shipping companies are unwilling to move the commodities. We're going to see some implementation of self-sanctions, and we may see a loss of another 2 to 2.5 million barrels of oil a day that come in over time. As a result of that, oil could go in directions that we have not seen yet. It's not impossible to imagine scenarios where one could have $150 to $200 for a barrel of oil. And a big factor will be, are there other supplies to fill in? The United States and Canada obviously are significant and major producers. Over the year, they can increase production. But the only two countries that really have the capacity to put more oil on the market very quickly have been Saudi Arabia and UAE. And up to now, we have not seen a response from them. So until that happens, it will become very difficult to show how oil markets can be balanced. And it will be difficult to be able to tackle this issue of cutting off Russian exports of oil unless there is a sense that there are alternative supplies that can mitigate the prices on consumers and on industry. Nobody wants to see huge price increases in gasoline and refined products. That's going to have a big impact on consumers, on economies, and it's that type of thing which probably Vladimir Putin is counting on to break the kind of unity that we've seen between the United States, Canada, and Europe.
Okay, Ambassador, thank you very much for your insights. Appreciate them.
Glad to be with you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.